Welcome to the Nestworks Toyhack instructional video. Imagine a little boy or girl like this one, or like this little girl who has cerebral palsy. For millions of children like them, playing with traditionally designed remote-controlled toys isn't possible, because these remote controllers are designed in such a way that you need fine motor control of the hands in order to use them. So we'll show you a simple way to hack this toy's remote controller and turn it into a new accessible one that's playable by all children. For this activity, you'll need a simple battery-powered remote-controlled toy car with handheld remote controller and thumb toggles for making the car move forward, backward, left and right. You'll need the right kind of batteries for the car, and best if they're new. 4 large push buttons and wire for soldering. You'll need to use wire strippers to prepare the wires for soldering, or wire cutters will do the job too. Of course, you'll need a soldering iron and some solder, and a screwdriver that will fit the screws in the remote controller, and safety goggles when you cut up the remote controller, and to check voltage you'll need a multimeter, and there'll be some gluing. And if you don't have our ready-to-assemble kit, you're going to have to be nice to a technician so that they'll help you operate a laser cutter. For this step, take the correct size screwdriver, remove batteries if any, and unscrew the unit, keeping hold of the tiny screws for later. And then carefully open the remote controller. After opening the remote controller, you're going to first need to understand the circuit board. You're going to be doing some soldering to these inner parts, so let's get to know them a bit. You're going to be connecting all this to those 4 large push buttons. In this kind of controller, there are 4 control points. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is forward, backward, left and right. And it's onto these that we need to connect our 4 large push buttons. You might find your remote controller is a bit different inside. It still has 4 buttons, like this one, but you need to figure out which one's which, perhaps testing the toy with batteries beforehand. So let's remove the antenna. That's the wire connected to the battery. You need that. Once again, here's where the push buttons get soldered to. And these points here are soldering pads. And first we need to use the multimeter to figure out which ones close the circuit. So we're going to ascertain which soldering pads are the ones we need to connect our wires. And that's a job for the multimeter. A multimeter is an instrument used to measure voltage, current, and to check whether a circuit is closed or not. So let's turn it on. And this is the setting we need. A closed circuit will beep. Let's check the remote controller. Touch the multimeter ends to the solder pads and push the remote controller buttons. Listening for the beep and seeing the voltage register on the multimeter. By using a multimeter, we have now established that these 4 points on the circuit board correspond to the remote control directional buttons. These are the components for assembling and soldering the push buttons. And there are 3 separate parts to the push button. And this is how it's put together. First, clip the two smaller components together. And then the main push button is locked into place. You can practice assembling the 4 push buttons, however you'll need to partly disassemble them when it comes to soldering. Plug in your soldering iron while you get the wires ready. The first step is preparing the end of the wires. So grab some wire strippers, or carefully using wire cutters will do the job too. Using the tool, carefully grip the insulation covering the wire and pull, stripping it off. Tidy up the end by twisting the wire filaments together neatly. Repeat this process so that both ends of all 8 pieces of wire are like this. Next you'll need the solder. Clean off the tip of the soldering iron and melt some solder over the end of the wire so that the filaments are nicely bonded together. And then using your wire cutters, trim the ends to no longer than 10 millimeters. And now the soldering starts, so make sure the soldering iron tip is clean. Apply some solder to the pad. Heat up the pad and the wire together and solder them together. You want to make sure you position and solder the wire carefully, so that it's only touching the soldering pad and not any other wires or parts of the circuit board. We're just applying some more solder here first. You can see from this that in fact a length of 2 to 3 millimeters of wire is long enough to solder to the pad. And that's the last one done. Now to test the integrity of our soldering, grab your multimeter and take the 2 ends of wire from one pair of soldering pads and hold them against the ends of the multimeter cables and get a helping hand to press the button. If all is well, you should hear a beep and the multimeter screen will indicate the voltage. For each pair of wires, carefully hold the ends closest to the board and twist them together. We recommend you find a way like this to separate the pairs of wires for each remote control button, and find a way of tagging them with a sticky label or marking them with some other method so that they're easily identifiable during assembly. If you've got one of our Toyhack kits with ready-made pieces, you can skip this part. And if you've got the CAD file we provided, you'll have your technician program the laser cutter for you. And if you're making your own design for the remote controller casing, more power to you. We want to encourage more people to share their ideas for design and functionality improvements. So please, if you do make improvements, or if you're using a new and improved Toyhack kit, you'll find that your design may differ slightly from this one. Okay, these are all the pieces for the remote control box and the 4 push buttons from earlier. Unscrew the top part of the button and secure it through the lid of the remote control unit. Repeat this for all 4 push buttons. Align them so that they're all neatly facing this direction, ready for attaching the wires. And there you have it, your 4 buttons in the top. And now you clip in the other part of the buttons, just like how we showed you earlier. Before you assemble any further, you need to do more soldering. You need to attach these 8 wires to the buttons. First, assign the directional function to each of the buttons. So forward, backward, left, and right. So grab something to write on the wood with and mark forward, backward, left, and right on both the front and back. We write FBLR on the other side too, so that it's more convenient when soldering. In preparation for soldering, take each pair of wires from the remote control and put them in position on the corresponding buttons. Try to make it as easy for yourself as you can. If you have different coloured wires, put one colour on the upper part of the switch, the other on the lower. So now this one is ready to solder, and be careful not to burn your fingers. When all 4 have been soldered, you can test it with the remote-controlled car. Turn the car on its back, check it has batteries if it needs them, and then turn it on. And press forward, backward, left and right. And again, check the batteries are in, it's switched on, forward, backward, left and right. For assembling the remote control box, we recommend a non-toxic, latex-based wood glue like this one. This kind of glue does need longer to dry than super glue, however, but it's non-toxic, so we like it. So flip open the glue lid and get yourself a spatula, glue brush or strip of wood to apply the glue. On the side pieces, apply glue in liberal quantities along one length. And then stick it together with the base of the box. And do the same with the other side. Apply a touch of glue to the ends of both side pieces and glue one of the small end pieces like this. For this particular remote control unit to fit inside the new box, we need to cut off the old handle. So use your wire cutters to cut off these parts here. Make sure the wires aren't in the way. Wear protective eye gear to be safe. The next step is to reattach the antenna to the circuit board, which in this case we did by soldering, but you might have better luck with reusing the original screw than we did. If you're soldering, then solder the antenna directly to the board itself. And then feed the antenna through the larger hole in the top of the box, like this. Put fresh batteries in the remote control, and then close up the battery compartment. Carefully slide it all in, with the batteries part underneath the push buttons. And the circuit board not too far in, as it mustn't touch any metal parts of the push button. And then close up the box. For testing once more, check that batteries are in the car and that it's switched on. So if one or more of the buttons aren't working, perhaps there's a broken wire, so you'll need to open the box up and check.
Ah,
It broke.
you see him.
Where is it?
A broken wire.
Ah.
So all you need to do is strip the end of the wire, like you did before, and resolder it onto the button. So take some fresh solder and clean the tip of the wire. And resolder it. Okay, let's test it again. And now carefully for the final part we glue again. However, for this part you don't want a lot of glue in case there'll be a need to access the interior at some point in the future. Just dabs of glue on the corners and along the lengths are really all you need. And now let's check one more time with the forward, backward, left and right. Okay, this piece of the box don't glue at all, as there'll be a need to open it from time to time in order to change the batteries. So just close it and tape it up with some masking tape or electrical tape. As we showed you previously, for the remote control to fit in the box, you might need to use wire cutters to trim off the extra handle parts. And you might find you have a remote control like this, one that is much too big to fit in the box. So if that's the case, you'll need to cut it into shape. Take some wire cutters, and be sure to protect your eyes from flying shards of plastic by wearing goggles. So unscrew and take out the circuit board. This battery holder is the essential part as it supplies the power to the circuit board. So just clip away all the superfluous plastic. So now you have the batteries holder and the board, which will fit in the box. Remember, you hacked this remote control and created a new one that children can play with without needing the fine motor control of their hands. So let's imagine how a child without hands might play with it. Or a child with limited finger control.